Welcome to Spiritual Practices. I am Reverend Nancy Dibelius of the Upper New York Conference of the United Methodist Church. Today, I invite you to explore the spiritual discipline of prayer. Prayer is perhaps the most foundational spiritual discipline in our faith lives. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, considered prayer to be one of the most significant means of grace, a channel by which God conveys God's abundant grace to us. Many of us are challenged by how to pray. We imagine that there is a right way to do this. But the Apostle Paul would encourage us to be less concerned about the form and to focus on our relationship with God. In Paul's letter to the church in Thessalonica, he tells his listeners to pray all the time. See the show notes for the specific scripture reference. Prayer is the way we enter into communion with God. Real prayer becomes life-giving and life-changing. To pray is to open ourselves to God's presence and movement in our lives. Yet for many of us, prayer is not well understood. For some, it seems intimidating and even fearful at times. Prayer takes many forms, but too often we believe that prayer is about us talking to God, asking, petitioning, making our desires known to God. Hear these words from a well-known Christian author. I have come to believe that prayer is not a matter of my calling in an attempt to get God's attention, but of my finally listening to the call of God, which has been constant, patient, and insistent in my inner being. In prayer, God is reaching out to me, speaking to me, and it is up to me to learn to be polite enough to listen. Do I respond to an invitation that is always open? See the show notes for more information on this author and quote. So, how do we listen? How do we open space where we can encounter God? There are many practices in the Christian faith that help us to open and enter space where we can listen for God. The show notes will provide a link to a series of videos that introduce a variety of prayer practices. Paul's invitation to pray all the time suggests an ancient prayer practice known as the breath prayer. This prayer practice emerged in the earliest years of the church and continues to be practiced today. The show notes will provide a link to a podcast about the breath prayer. Go to my Facebook page, Spiritual Journeys with Reverend Nancy, for a link to a video on breath prayers. As you consider the importance of prayer in your own life, look to the examples of prayer in Jesus' life. Prayer for Jesus was always an intimate encounter with God, and in those prayerful times, the meaning of his own identity was more clearly revealed to him. His prayers were marked by deep trust, intimacy, sincerity, honesty, integrity, and gratitude. Open yourself to the intimacy of a prayerful relationship with God and listen.